will go on. How about that? Yeah, this is what I feel like tonight, huh? Steelers? Or maybe I should feel like this instead. I don't know. We are live Thursday night with now with real Thursday night football. And the Quaternary, the fellas, the family back together. It's Sigmund Bloom, Matt Waldman, Dr. Jene Bramel, and me, Cecil Lammey, here to talk to you about the top 5 training camp worries. But before we get into all that, right, I know I'm a stickler for the cold open. I just want to go around the room. Matt, how you feeling? We got football back, baby.
Yeah, that's great. Got a Hall of Fame game going to go on this weekend as well. Get the chance to see some enshrinements of some terrific players, including Edgerrin James, who, as Brian Fry adroitly mentioned on Twitter, no one's gained more yards in the first 38 games of their career than Edgerrin James. And as I pointed out, when someone said Fred Taylor was better, that Fred Taylor couldn't pass protect or run short yardage like Edgerrin James could. So great player, going to get an opportunity to that's well-deserved even after injury. So very excited about that.
Love it. Matt, you're going to love this because the Steelers have me thinking about dipping in tonight because Mason Rudolph stinks. This whole thing stinks. But Dr. Jene Bramel, it doesn't stink to talk football with you, buddy. How's it going?
It's August 5th, man. I don't think you need to be pouring one out for the Steelers just yet.
I like his preemptive thought, though.
I'm still drinking it. Bloom, how are you doing, buddy?
Oh, it's great. I just wish we could be in Canton. It's Steelers weekend there. And Bill Nunn, that's a name people need to know. They already know the name Alan Faneca. There's a connection to my current home state, Louisiana. And it's good. It's good to celebrate all the things that football has brought into our lives, continues to bring into our lives, and including the four of us having used to get together and hang out.
How about bringing that into my life? It burns. It really burns. And I'll say this, Tom Flores, I got a chance to talk to him a couple of nights ago. The first minority head coach to win a Super Bowl, was the Raiders' first quarterback. And as a Chicano, I always appreciated seeing Tom Flores on those sidelines, man. So it was great talking to him. Steve Atwater, dear friend, like Peyton Manning, dear friend, like such a great weekend. John Lynch, oh my God, it's like a Broncos show, but it is a top 5 worries, training camp worries, Dr. Gene, and you are here to assuage the fear. You're here to help us, as always, talk through these situations. And number 1 on Sigmund's list of worries is Joe Burrow. What are you hearing, Dr. Gene, about the Bengals quarterback? And, well, how should fantasy owners be concerned / worried?
What we're hearing, the tone of the reports this week is he's just not comfortable in the pocket at all and not making throws downfield, not accurate downfield, doesn't seem to be comfortable there at all. And that's not too out of the range of what you would expect. It was a complicated ACL injury. It was always reassuring that he was back and participating in mini camps at all. But the final hurdles, not just one is getting into football conditioning, and he's getting there. But the other is being confident in how your knee feels in uncertain situations. And he's not there yet. And I would imagine he would get there soon enough. It's going to take some time to get back to the speed of the game. We're talking about a player that probably in these team drills, 7-on-7 and 11-on-11 drills, is not getting pressure at all. There may be some people flashing across his face, but no one on the Bengals defense is going to touch Joe Burrow or run the risk of being immediately shown to the locker room at this time in training camp. So, we've got a good 7 or 8 weeks for him to get there. I think he'll probably be a little bit slow to start the season. He was a scrambler and a mover and a mobile quarterback for much of his college career and last year. I don't know that we're going to see too much of that, but I don't think overreacting to the first week of preseason practices in any way is a concerning sign. It's good that he's out on the field and not on the PUP list. It's good that they're trusting him to take first team reps. Just going to take him a little bit longer to get there.
Gene, I think since we started recording this show, going live here, there has not been any more bad news about the Colts. But there's been a lot of bad news about the Colts. And really, there's just a catch-all here. There's Carson Wentz. And just help us understand why they're saying, let's wait a week or two into rehab before we really understand what the timeline is here. And there's Quentin Nelson. Quentin Nelson's going to be on the field week 1. Okay. But there's still Ryan Kelly and his elbow issue. And then there's Eric Fisher. Last we heard back in May, coming back from an Achilles, he may not play until October. I haven't really heard much after that. There's a lot of moving parts here, a lot of breaking down parts. What do you know?
I think the Carson Wentz issue, first and foremost, is when you say there's a lot of bad news surrounding the Colts, that was a little bit of good news. Now, it was surprising to hear that there was a foot issue that escalated to, are we going to have surgery or are we not? 12-week potential miss half the season, kind of at the initial timetables until we knew a little bit better idea of what was going on. The fact that he had the surgery this week didn't show any associated damage, and all they sounds like they did is to actually go in and remove that small piece of offending bone that broke off the outside of his outside foot bone. There is a good thing. It doesn't sound like there was any tendon issues, doesn't sound like there was any ligament issues around that area, and there's a few smaller things that might have needed to be cleaned up. And the fact that that wasn't the case pretty much takes the 10 to 12 week timetable off the table, so to speak. That's, everything is possible in rehab. Maybe there's some setbacks or other issues, but the fact that there wasn't anything that definitely required a more delayed start to rehab is a good sign. Why 2 weeks? Mostly to allow the incision to heal, mostly to make sure that there isn't anything about the foot that's a setup for concern about slowing the rehab after the healing process ends. The 5 to 12 week it's just a kind of a bizarre thing. Usually you'll hear, 4 to 6 or 6 to 8 or 10 to 12 or something like that, 2 to 3 months, what have you. The 5 weeks is simply, it just puts week 1 into the rehab timetable a little bit. And I think that's possible, but I think it's probably more reasonable to expect mid-September or a little bit later. If he's ready and he doesn't have any pain and he's mobile enough to play the position, you could see him there in week 1. But the Colts are telling us they're just not going to be sure yet. They want to allow the incision to heal and then see how he does. The offensive line is going to be an issue until we hear otherwise. All 3 of those players could struggle to return during camp, with Fisher chief among them. I don't expect him to necessarily be ready for week 1, but as you say, Nelson's got the same injury. He's going to go through the same rehab process, but the demands on his position are a little bit different, and we know offensive linemen would play through just about anything if they're upright, and you would expect Nelson to be the case. Kelly, I don't have quite as much information on. Hopefully he'll be ready to go. Elbows, unless there's a clearly still unstable situation there, you'd expect him to be able to brace up and go as well. So with a little bit of luck, the entire Colts offense will be ready to go by the end of September, and hopefully even a little bit sooner than that, minus Fisher.
Good deal. So, Gene, should people be worried about Dak Prescott at all?
Not really. I was glad that he showed enough in the offseason so that the ankle doesn't seem like it was going to be an issue that would limit his mobility moving forward. Now, when you hear that there's a muscle strain, it was kind of initially billed as a shoulder, and you worry a little bit about shoulder situations, throwing shoulder situations with quarterbacks, and teams are going to give their quarterbacks in that situation as long to recover as possible. This isn't exactly a shoulder situation. It's the muscle on the back that kind of wraps up underneath the armpit. And you could call that a shoulder issue because it's probably going to limit the range of motion in the shoulder because of where that muscle inserts onto the upper arm bone. Any muscle issue is going to be something that they're going to allow to completely recover in the same way that any shoulder issue would have been there. So it is not surprising at all. There's no setback here. When you heard that it was going to be a day-to-day situation and they might allow him to rest and not throw for a couple of days, it was always going to be longer than that. Again, it's August 5th today. So he does not need to be ready until into September. And there's no sense in risking an aggravation of a muscle strain in the same way that you'd have a wide receiver with a hamstring issue. There's no reason to rush this at all, knowing that he's healthy coming into that moment. Let that area cool down, make sure he's got full range of motion. And then when that happens, start him on a throwing program. And there's no reason to expect that he won't be ready for week 1 in his usual workload and make every throw that he may need to make.
It is the Audible Live here, Thursday night, football going on, cold pops or whatever Matt's drinking. Looks like water, right? Staying hydrated.
It looked like some of what the chat room was talking about you and Sig doing.
Yeah, something like
that's why I had to hold the bottle up a little bit.
Hold up the jug.
But it's only weird if you make it weird, but then that's it. But if Gene would say that must mean he's a closet freak.
Keep trying to turn the audience against me. It's not happening.
It can't happen against Dr. Gene. It is a Broncos show, and I'm watching Cortland Sutton. I'm watching Cortland Sutton every day, Dr. Gene, and he looks a little bit better, but he's wearing that big knee brace. It just seems like mentally he's not yet ready to let it go. I did see him make a couple twisting catches behind him, which then I got all mad because I was like, Drew Lock, stop. And then Teddy did it too. So I was like, just stop. These guys, stop. Don't make him twist and turn to make these catches. He did. Nothing wrong. No limp. Nothing like that. But it just seems like a little bit of the explosion. Any of the high catches he's not yet making. Is this just something to come around in the next month or so?
Yeah, you would hope so, right? And I mean, I don't know that I'd be too scared about him making twisting catches. Probably him, being not really forced to do that, but having to do that in the moment and reacting to it, and then finding out that, hey, I did that just fine, is going to build up the mental wherewithal to know that, okay, my knee is recovered as I need it to be to go out and do some of these things. And yeah, I think you're going to see, again, none of these ACLs last year were simple ACLs. Burrow had multiple ligaments. Barkley had multiple ligaments and a meniscus. Sutton had multiple ligaments. Those delay rehab, and it takes a little bit longer for the surrounding muscles, the quads and the hamstrings and so on and so forth, to be strong enough to stabilize that joint. It takes a little bit longer for the knee to understand where it is in space. And I know I'm talking about the knee kind of in the third person there, but what you don't see, even if the quads and everything are back, is it takes time for that ligament to help the knee to understand, okay, this is where I am, and when I move in this direction, I know how far to go, and that reflects on how comfortable you are in space. So with each practice, you'd expect him to feel a little bit more comfortable. If that doesn't happen over the next month or so, then you have to worry about, okay, was there a little bit more of a cartilage situation there than we knew about? Is he going to have a little bit more wear and tear and some maintenance that's necessary? Is he going to be the same player that he was before the injury? And it's probably still a little bit soon for us to know that. You're probably going to have a little bit better idea watching him play in and play out, and how he goes back and walks back to the line before the next drill takes place, or how quickly he gets back to the line between the team drills, and all of those sorts of things. And then there's some things we're just not going to know that the team themselves will know. So I think, again, it's early on. Ask these questions again in a month if we're still sharing the same concerns or more. Then it's time to get a lot more concerned about whether or not this is going to be a lingering issue and affect the play-to-play progression about how a player does during the regular season. For now, I think there's plenty of time for people to get their feet underneath them, again, no pun intended, and hope that they're ready to go. So, and I think you can expect that with Sutton. Is he going to be the player he was before? I don't think anybody can say that with any certainty, but I think you still be willing to give him the benefit of the doubt until he's had enough time in football-related situations to recover and prove otherwise.
You're on a roll, Gene. Eric Fisher, chief among them, getting their feet under them. This is good, man. This is real Freudian. I don't know how to put a Freudian twist on the twist of the knee that Devontae Smith suffered, strained MCL, and it makes me think for all of these injuries, there's a mental side, not just a physical side. And I think that MCL strains have been one that have come up periodically, that even if it's healed, it's a question of the player having confidence in the joint. What can you tell us about Smith? Of course, keeping in mind that also he's a rookie missing training camp.
I think that's always the case, is that you worry a little bit about confidence in any injury when you come back. Players want to come back as soon as possible. They don't want to wait. They'd probably rather come back a week too soon rather than a week too late. If you were, and this sounds silly to say, but if you were going to pick a knee ligament to injure, you'd pick the MCL. It's the one that's least likely to require surgery. Although it's a stabilizing ligament of the knee, it's one that, sometimes you can recover from within 2 to 4 weeks, even with a relatively significant mid-grade strain. We have plenty of time before the regular season for that to happen. But you're right, you're hitting on the important thing here is we need to get in football conditioning. We need to start working with the players on the team and getting used to Jalen Hurts and all those sorts of things. There doesn't seem to be a ton of competition around him right now. So we're not looking at a young player that's competing to be the second or third wide receiver with a bunch of folks around him that have similar talent levels. It's a player that was specifically chosen to fill this particular role. There's not a lot of players around him at this point that's going to compete for that. So when he's healthy, as soon as he's in condition enough to take a full workload, you'd think he'd be able to do so. And you wouldn't necessarily think that the MCL would be a lingering issue into the middle of the year, like some other knee ligaments or other soft tissue injuries would be.
Gene, I have a joke for you. So what do Will Fuller and cicadas have in common?
Yes.
Okay. Well, they both are out of view for a long period of time. Much anticipated when they do appear. They appear for a short period of time, and then basically they stink it up your rosters like roadkill, basically, when it's all over in that quick period of time. So I just wonder what's going on with Will Fuller now, and is he about to stink up your roster like roadkill?
Did y'all have cicadas this year?
I didn't, no.
A few.
So here in the Midwest and in Ohio specifically, they're the 17-year cicada is a big thing. So I was strangely that you mentioned that, as I was just thinking driving home today that I haven't heard a cicada for about 6 weeks, and I kind of miss them, as loud as they were. So I don't think anybody, at least I didn't see anything specifically today. I didn't go and do another specific search, but as of yesterday, I don't think anybody knew specifically what was going on with Will Fuller. It was an undisclosed injury of some sort that happened in the early days of training camp, kind of considered day to day, but a lot of these wide receivers, when you're dealing with soft tissue injuries, and that's almost certainly what's going on with Fuller again, that you think it's going to be more of a week to week than a day to day situation. So at some point we're going to get some disclosure as far as what it is. Will Fuller's history with soft tissue injuries is extensive and significant and concerning, and unlike some of the situations he's been in the past, there are some players around him now. Preston Williams is still on PUP, but Jalen Waddle is off to a good start. Devontae Parker is no slouch there as well. And you always worry about a player of Fuller's caliber whose primary route is a downfield situation. And if you've got some sort of, and you're just, I think it's best to just assume that it's a lower extremity soft tissue situation. That takes some time to recover. Now, last year was a good year for Will Fuller. We'll see how this year goes. Again, a lot of time before we're going to start being concerned about 1 week leading into 2 into 3. And now is he going to be ready in time to get conditioned for the regular season? Hopefully it's very much a day-to-day situation. We see him back on the practice field sooner than later. Are you guys aware of something that I'm not, that there was a little bit more disclosure about what the injury precisely was? Sig, are you aware of anything that I'm not there? Anything been better defined?
I didn't see anything across the wire.
And I don't think we're gonna. There's no reason for the Dolphins to say anything, so we're not going to know until Fuller comes back, unless it becomes a 2 or 3 week situation and somebody pretty much has to say something. Otherwise, they're going to be asked continually about it. So, not too concerned right now, other than we know what Fuller's history is. If we're in the middle of August and he's still not practicing and it's going on 3 weeks, then yes, we have to get a little bit more worried about it. This is something that's going to linger into week 1.
It is the Audible Live right here on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/footballguystv. Make sure to do all those YouTube things, like, comment, share, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so that you never miss a vid. Thank you, Sasha. And also check out our Football Guys mobile app, our Draft Dominator app. Will make sure that you have an edge above your teammates by customizing the advice specific to your team. Download today so Football Guys can help you win. Let's get this one in from the chat room. Freddie says, would Dr. Bramel draft Saquon Barkley?
Yeah, I think at some point it's going to be worth it to draft him. But look, we saw him and his quads running on the beach and looking fine, and we are all kind of reassured about that in May and June. But the Giants have been telling us from the beginning that they're going to be careful with him. And why would the Giants be careful with him? There's not a lot behind him on the roster. He's a stud. They know he's talented. The only reason they say they might need to limit his workload is they know the type of injury he has, and they know it's going to take a little bit more time to recover. We're talking about a player that didn't even have surgery for 5 to 6 weeks after the injury because the swelling needed to go down so that they could repair the meniscus, which takes time to heal enough for them to feel comfortable moving the knee in rehab. So this was never a Adrian Peterson 6 to 7 month situation. It was probably never a 7 to 9 month situation. And I know the surgery took place, I think it was Halloween, October 31st or something like that, but we're right up against it right now. So it's no surprise that he's on the PUP list and not participating. He still has to recondition. So is he going to be, I know we talked about this a couple of weeks ago, are we talking about a 12 to 15 touch player in week 1? Is it going to be less than that or not? Whenever he is ready to go, he's going to get the full workload in New York. I don't think that's going to be week 1, and it's getting harder to know with each passing week that they don't allow him to start the conditioning process when that 12 to 15 touches is going to start. Is he going to be ready for week 1 at this point? It's really hard to know. In the article I wrote on Monday, I marked him questionable for week 1, and that's a fluid situation. I still think they're expecting to have him available for the regular season. I certainly don't think we're going to see him start on the PUP list or IR, but there's really no indication right now, and hasn't been for months, that he's going to be ready to take a full workload in week 1. So is he draftable? Yes. Do you still consider him at the bottom of that top tier of running backs? You're getting a little bit out of my area of expertise there based on the relative values of others. I think with, for example, Aaron Rodgers back and the Green Bay offense looking to be what it is. Aaron Jones is moving up into that category now. We were talking a couple of weeks ago about Saquon being, kind of at the back end of the first round. Now maybe is he falling around the turn? At some point, you would expect him to be healthy enough to get a full workload, probably by playoff time. So there's going to be a time in which you look at the wide receivers that are available. And there are a number of them now that are having some extra value with Devontae Adams moving up and where that break in the running back tier happens. I don't think I'd drop him all the way into the second tier unless we hear that he's just not going to be available for the first couple of weeks of the season. But I think you move him down to the bottom of the first tier, and then it's a relative value question between the tight ends, the wide receivers that are available versus some of the running backs at the very top of the next tier.
Gene, I'm going to bring up a player that David Wirtz, longtime supporter of the show and Footballguys. What's up, David? He brought up Michael Thomas. And I guess I would put it this way, Gene. At this moment, if someone stopped you on the street, because I know people stop you on the street all the time because of Fivish's work, and they said, should I take Michael Thomas? If they said, Dr. Gene, should I take Michael Thomas? Is it Nancy Reagan, just say no? Or is it young Jeezy, scared money don't make no money?
It's more Nancy than Jeezy, I think, at this point. Again, he's a player that if you're drafting him, you knew that you'd get me to say something like that once in a while. Yeah. I think that if you're drafting Thomas, you're hoping he's available for weeks 14 to 17, right? I mean, that's really what you want him for in this situation. I don't know that he's going to be ready to be productive immediately after being eligible to come off the PUP list. I think, he's going to be on PUP. It's going to be a minimum of 6 weeks, and he may well take another couple of weeks to be ready for practice. If they keep him on the PUP list, they're going to have to I don't remember if they've changed things with COVID or not, but last year the PUP list got sort of extended where you had to make a decision by week 11 rather than in that 7 to 9 range. So I think it's going to be October at the earliest and very easily into November. And then we've had this conversation with tons of players over the years that these sorts of ankle surgeries are not easy to recover from. And you may be cleared for football activity, but that doesn't mean that you have full lateral and vertical explosion out of your breaks, that you're going to achieve the same separation that you did before. It may not be until 2022 that Michael Thomas is back to his usual self. So I would not draft him with the idea that he's going to be a starter for you until very late in the season. And so that then comes to, is there enough room on your roster to stash a player like that? Do you have in a redraft league the ability to put players on injured reserve and stash them for a while so they're not taking up an active roster spot? Is it going to prevent you from attacking other players on the waiver wire earlier in the year? What do you do if we're not sure what's going on in week 6 and 7? It becomes week 10 and 11 and you've been holding. Are you willing to do all of those things? If you are, and you can get him as a wide receiver 4 or probably even later than that, then yeah, it's probably worth the risk knowing where we are. And then you have to ask yourself, what happens if Jameis Winston and Taysom Hill are a mess, and who's going to be throwing the balls and how many targets is he going to get? All of those sorts of things. So definitely more Nancy than Jeezy at this point. I'm all about scared money don't make money, but in this situation, I don't see a lot of upside in him until very late into the season. And I could tell multiple stories where he may not be productive at all until next year.
Let's go back to Miami and talk about the baby tiger shark in the receiving core there, Jalen Waddle, who it seems from reports he's still walking around with a limp. But at the same time, you're still hearing people say at 90%, Jalen Waddle's faster than most humans on earth. But can you decipher the situation from what you're hearing about his camp and the injury and whether he'll regain his pre-injury speed after the procedure that he had?
Yeah, I've heard mostly good things about Waddle and Tua in general. I think that's a good sign. We're pretty far removed from the what I think was a tightrope procedure that he had at the end of his college year last year. So you wouldn't think that would be an issue. If it's not limiting him in these early camp practices and we don't see them manage his workload toward the end of camp, I don't think it's going to be an issue. You think he'd be able to fully recover from that injury and be as close to full strength as he can be by week 1.
It is the Audible. It is Cecil Lammey, Sigmund Bloom, Matt Waldman, Dr. Jene Bramel here for you as we actually have live football going on. Feels good to be back, fellas. And Dr. Jene, we certainly appreciate your time as always. And man, just it's great seeing your face. I miss your musk.
It's good to have the band back together as always.
That's true. Be good, Dr. Jene. We'll talk to you soon.
Keep it weird, brother.
Mm-hmm.
See ya.
There he is, Dr. Jene Bramel. Sigmund Bloom. I haven't said this one in a while.
Yeah.
Give us a game update.
Well, I haven't got to see all of this scintillating preseason action, but we saw a miscue on a play, Micah Parsons jumping on the ball, Garrett Gilbert gets a field goal. We did see a lot of Najee Harris out there, and I think Doug Farrar, who's royalty in our circles, echoed something, Cecil, that we were talking about earlier this week on the preseason watch list, that Najee Harris is more Steven Jackson than Le'Veon Bell.
Yes.
And that's fine, although as I was chatting with someone on Twitter, that means he's not the kind of back who can rescue an offense that doesn't have anything else going for it. Now, it might have a little bit going for it. We saw some things changing in the Steelers' offense, more motion, the things that were promised, right? But still, it looks like the Steelers' offense from last year in terms of where they're attacking and how they're attacking, getting the ball to Deontay Johnson when he's going upfield. You did see a nice catch by Claypool at the sidelines. Not really seeing much Dallas-wise from their first-team offense. Lyle Collins is back. And it's just good that there's football. We get back to this, especially in these times. We just want to see everybody make it through the preseason healthy. No injuries. We want to see everybody get a full chance to show what they can do in the regular season. And, of course, that also helps people who draft early as we get to the annual refrain of don't draft until the last week. So we just want everyone to stay healthy. And this game, just knock the rust off. Football's back. And I think that it's a wonderful feeling being back together with all of our friends.
Matt, do you knock the rust off by getting in a dog pile with your teammates and being at the bottom as the starting quarterback, as the Giants did? The Kenny Golladay, we didn't even ask Dr. Gene about Kenny Golladay and the hamstring.
Right.
I mean, Matt, you want to talk about disaster for the beginning with the Giants here. And Joe Judge is a tool. I mean, there's just no doubt about that. I mean, come on, we're going to be honest.
A useful tool?
No. So he's sort of
like there's more.
Right. It's like one of those tape measures that's fake, and you just pull it out so far it stops. Like, what's the matter with this thing?
Speaking of Freudian.
Yes, exactly. Matt, what's going on with the Giants? The top 5 worries, right? Everyone wants the catchy title. Oh my God! Now it's started. Now that I'm drinking tonight, I was like, I got to get that catchy title. Top 5 worries, Matt. How worried are you about the Giants?
I'd say my number one worry is that all our readers are going to buy into any worry about the preseason right now. There are some concerns, but I mean, really, are you drafting Giants players at this point? My answer would be then yes, that might be my top 5 worry for you, because. You look at Golladay, and he was brought in by Gettleman to essentially erase some of the accuracy concerns that you have with Daniel Jones. I mean, he's not a pinpoint accurate guy. Yeah, Kellen Benjamin. There you go. So a Sig favorite from a long time ago. That's a big time Sig favorite right there. So, and then Benjamin had his kind of moment about. I played at 280 back when I was with the
and then he was in Giants camp for a moment.
For a moment, and then it was over. But yeah, when you look at Golladay, he's supposed to mitigate some of those accuracy concerns that Daniel Jones has. But if you're going to have to do, speaking of Cortland Sutton worries, twisting and turning and things getting hurt. Well, I was kind of joking on Footballguys message board when this happened that essentially, of course, that hamstring got tight and wanted to pop because he was probably having to deal with all of the inaccurate passes he was trying to catch in camp. And, this one, it finally just burst on like a mundane looking play. But, even with Golladay, who was very good in the contested situation, the fact remains that Daniel Jones is still pocket deaf. He doesn't have a good feel for how to manage that, and he takes hits and gives the ball away. He hangs in there too much. He's a brave guy. That's fine, but I'm glad teammates are happy that he'll be, he's willing to scrap it up and get in the bottom of a pile, but I'd rather have Mac Jones, who's willing to take a hard hit and throw a touchdown pass that's pinpoint accurate, and read the defense well and know how to preemptively manage the pocket and move around. Something that I think that even with hypnosis training, pills, steroids, anything that he could possibly get, I don't think will make a difference for him. So I'm, until Daniel Jones proves he's not a fraud, I'm still going to say he's a fraud.
He's a fraud.
And for fantasy, yeah.
Yeah. Well, and then Jones goes to offense. Can I interject here, Cease?
Of course.
Because I think that some of the stuff, we've reached some sort of inflection point. What was it in Spaceballs? Ludicrous speed, right?
Right.
Like, I feel like the reality is at ludicrous speed right now because reality and satire of reality are merging. I want to say that Joe Judge said he was turned on by the brawl. I think
that's what he said. Yeah,
he said he was turned on.
I was kind of turned on by it.
I was kind of turned on by it, which we jokingly suggested. When it happened, we were joking. Yeah, he probably loved it. But they asked Robert Saleh about it. Did you see this? They asked Robert Saleh, how do you feel about disciplining players with laps and push-ups? He said, for me, it's more about creating accountability with self rather than forcing accountability. These players are grown men. Ooh.
Joe Judge was a grown man when he saw that pileup. Anyway.
Sorry. New York.
Sorry, Joe. We don't have to sorry Joe that. I just said, yeah, he's pitching a tent.
There are ways to get things around the censors.
Exactly.
3,
YouTube overlords.
2, 1. We have ignition. Yes.
Oh my God. Yeah, it's pretty bad when Todd Davis signs on Saturday and retires on Tuesday. Retires on a Tuesday. So yeah, okay. Good luck. Matt gets that one.
I love Steelers. I love Steelers games. This brings out like the best in the both of you when we're doing these shows. Like, I don't have to take the show off the rails. You guys get to do it. Like,
we're already off the rails. There are no rails.
I love it.
Cheers. It's the Steelers stinking up the joint and Mason Rudolph. Oh, God. Please, for the love of God, why do they think Mason Rudolph's good, Sig? Like, I'm getting off track here. But
because he's handsome, because he has like a lantern jaw, because he looks the part. No, but I mean, again, reality and satire of reality merge. But the good thing is that Mike Tomlin feels like Dwayne Haskins is getting something for nothing, which tells me that he's something, which is a place to start. And it's more than I can say about Mason Rudolph at this point. So there's some hope of better quarterback play than Mason Rudolph down the line. But yeah, we're in full. They had me on another podcast. Calvin and Hobby hosted it. Great host, great show, just to talk about the Steelers. And I warned everybody up front, I'm an erotic Steelers fan. I'm going to give you the pessimistic Steelers take because that's all I can see at this point, and I'm open to being surprised, but not expecting it.
Not expecting it at all. It is the Audible Live here, and Cecil Lammey, Sigmund Bloom, Matt
I love
Waldman.
the Gundy quote.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I'm Mike Gundy. I'm 40. Well, he's 50 now. Right? He's got to be like 50 here right now. Our dear friend, Chris Trapasso from CBS Sports, had a report about the Eagles being close to trading for Deshaun Watson. Sigmund, I'll throw it back to you super quick.
Yeah.
I know PFF was like, this is not that close. Well, it doesn't mean it's not happening. And I always love the counter report, right? It's like when my Sam Darnold thing came out, it was like the 49ers were going to give up a first rounder for Sam Darnold. And then, everyone's like, that's not true. I was like, okay, I can't tell you who I heard it from, but if I did, it was. So here we go. Speculation about where Deshaun Watson will land. And then fantasy GMs are like, well, what do I do with my Eagles now?
Right. Both can be true. I mean, they can be closing in on a trade and the actual consummation of the trade still be subject to other people's decision-making. Because the reality is no GM that is in his right mind, and I think Howie Roseman, at least in the way I'm using the term right now, is in his right mind, is going to trade the boatload of picks and assets. Because, again, we can go back to when we first started talking about this, before there was this legal situation hanging over Deshaun Watson, that it was unprecedented for a 25-year-old quarterback, I think 25, entering his peak years to be available, a franchise quarterback to be available in the trade market. Now, what that means is you can get into Herschel Walker level trade compensation for him. But no GM, and while this situation is open-ended, is going to give that up. And if Nick Caserio is in his right mind, he's not going to trade Deshaun Watson unless he gets that. Now, what can happen right now is figuring out a trade in principle. I highly recommend folks use this in fantasy football, by the way. You can talk about this before your rookie drafts. You can talk about this as when a team is 1-3 and say, hey, if you get to 1-5, are you willing to trade away, Tom Brady or something like that? You can come up with a trade in principle and say it's conditional on certain things happening. In this case, it's Deshaun Watson's legal and the situation with his league status clearing up, which I don't think is going to happen until after the season. So these things can both be true. But what we can read between the lines and see, because at a certain point, you say, we're hearing this from so many different people independently. Chris Trapasso, by the way, has been on the Audible too, that it can't just be a misinformation, disinformation campaign. The Eagles are interested, very interested. Now, can Jalen Hurts make them not as interested in the meantime? Sure. And in fact, if hearing this makes Jalen Hurts feel... the good news is Jalen Hurts is used to having to hear talk about this for most of his college career, right? He always had the bullseye on him. So it's nothing new for him. And we'll see. It's not going to get done tomorrow. It's not going to get done next week. It's not probably going to get done next month. But when it does come to pass, or if it does come to pass, I don't know how close those two possibilities are, we were warned. We knew this was in the offing. Even whenever there was a rumor a few weeks ago that Miami was still open to taking Deshaun Watson, in the article, I think it was Adam Beasley, who used to cover the Dolphins, said, but the Eagles have more ammo. The Eagles have more power, mainly because of the trade the Eagles and Dolphins made. So I think they can both be true. I think they can be getting close to a trade, but also a trade is not immediately going to happen because the league and legal system has to work this out.
Matt, not in those what's wrong with me type of moments, but okay, and I know it's Deshaun Watson, right? And we have to say it's Deshaun Watson cleared of everything, and it's Deshaun Watson. Jalen Hurts isn't a slappy, but what did you see last year? And obviously we watched him down at the Senior Bowl, where he's there with Justin Herbert. I mean, there's some skill there. He's certainly incredibly raw, and all things weren't rosy for him. From a fantasy perspective, everyone's like, woo, yeah, because he can run. But he also chooses to run way too soon. But it just seems like, okay, well, you have Hurts. I know it's Watson, and a cleared Watson would be superstar, whatever is whatever. But your thoughts on Jalen Hurts and kind of this whole situation and why the Eagles would have so much interest?
Well, I think the Eagles have been lukewarm about Jalen Hurts this whole time. They pretty much ended it with Carson Wentz. Hurts was an excuse to basically just totally put the nail in the coffin of Carson Wentz, even though he did that himself for a good bit of time, during the season. So when he played reasonably well for a rookie, a mid-round rookie, they decided we're going to give him a shot next year. And this is his tryout. And they're trying to make sure that they spin this as a tryout. It comes down to where the coaching staff said, we're not installing any special plays to leverage his running ability. This isn't an offense bent around him. He's going to have to actually play up to the standards of the offense. That was mentioned in the offseason early this spring. So that's that kind of warning shot to say, we're not creating this for him long term. He needs to prove what he can do. They brought Joe Flacco in, which again may not speak to anything from a fantasy perspective, but it's still something that you have a veteran quarterback that they know can man the ship if they need him to, just from a perspective that they're not an even greater disaster, if Hurts doesn't work out. But the thing with Hurts' game is this, as you mentioned, great being able to run, powerful, has the quickness, speed, you can break big plays. It's a lot like, if you are our age, a lot like David Garrard, a young David Garrard, who can run for power, run with speed, make people miss, buy time in the pocket, and he has a really spectacular deep arm and strong potential in the vertical game. The issue with him is that he is overinvested in trying to prolong plays to the extent that the longer he keeps a play alive, the more he thinks he has to hit a play downfield, and that leads to bad decisions. This is something that a lot of young players who are mobile do. Malik Willis, a very big name out of Liberty in the Devy circuit. You'll know who he is coming up fairly soon.
Everyone's saying first rounder.
Has this problem. He has a gun of an arm, but he would rather throw a ball around, basically around a fire hydrant and under a shrub, to one receiver covered by three people, because he pinned himself into a corner after making five people miss, and throw it behind the guy, and there's three defenders who have better chance on the ball than the receiver. That's Malik Willis's flaw right now. that's also Jalen Hurts' flaw at times right now. So we need to see him do a better job of being a mature game manager and not Mitch Trubisky it, inside the 20s, where it just goes haywire and he starts throwing the ball in situations where he should just throw the ball away and live for another day. But again, as a person and the mindset you want from an NFL player in terms of day in and day out, how you handle adversity, how you handle competition, Jalen Hurts did a fantastic job at Alabama behind Tua after he lost that gig to Tua and then goes to Oklahoma and lights it up. He was a good teammate. And so I think this is a guy that the hope here is that he can handle the competition, and he's going to step up for that. The big issue really isn't whether he's going to cave in from what the media is worried about or what other people are doing. It's just whether or not he really has the growth potential to become a top starter. And I think the answer right now is unlikely, but good enough that he should be given the opportunity to prove it. So I understand why the Eagles are in the situation they are.
Jalen Hurts treats playing quarterback like playing putt-putt golf, where you got the windmill, right, where it's going around, then you got to bounce it off the corner and then through the clown's mouth and then past the windmill and then, hole in one. Yeah, it's not like that.
Mm-hmm. Did you take Marcy Rossman to putt-putt before the dance?
The pre-dance date.
No, we might have went cow tipping, but that's about it.
Okay.
Out there for Colorado. Sigmund, let's talk about DeAndre Swift super quick before we wrap up tonight's program.
Yeah.
Because Swift's got a groin injury. How much of a concern is that there? He's limited with groin tightness.
Well, see, so I'm working on an article that I'm going to give credit to. Actually, he was my rival. Academically, Quiz Bowl. You guys remember this from high school, this whole phenomenon. I at Bentworth Beth Center, we were high schools that were right next to each other. And Joe Wright, he was my rival in academic league. And he actually sent me, remember we were talking about this, Cease, the players that you're relieved to see someone else draft.
He
nailed
picks,
it. The
right?
Roll-Aids picks, yeah. I think DeAndre Swift is kind of a Roll-Aids pick because he's a good enough player, and the Lions' offensive line is good enough, and the way that they're going to be committed to the run and the way that Swift can play in the passing game is enough to picture a successful season where you're happy you took him in the third round. But also, Jamal Williams looms, and depending on who you ask, I think Albert Breer, who's been doing these 5 points threads of all the camps that he's visiting, said DeAndre Swift is the bell cow. Don't quote me on that. But you saw it was very much counter.
Albert Breer. Oh, wait, was I supposed to say that? Yeah, he talked trash about one of my friends when we were down in Mobile. So I was like, screw that guy. Like, whatever. Albert Breer.
The ball's bigger than him.
The only reason that I even quote Albert Breer, I have no firsthand personal experiences of Albert Breer, him saying anything about anybody I know, is that he probably gets to talk to people when he goes to camps. And if everyone's saying it's a committee and then he says that's their bell cow, then I'm noticing that. My point, I'll wrap this all up and just say that this little thing, right? So if there's these players, the Roll-Aids picks, they're not players that are on your avoid list. They're not players that are on your target list. They're players that you almost dread seeing them available when you're on the clock because you don't really want to take them, but part of you could talk yourself into taking them. So I'll just say this, seeing DeAndre Swift having any ailment whatsoever gives you some reason to not think long, think wrong, and don't take him over Chris Carson. Don't take him over J.K. Dobbins. Don't take him over the wide receivers. Don't take him over Kyle Pitts. This is another reason to not take him in the third round. Take those Roll-Aids. Calm that stomach down.
See, Matt, Sigmund is a lover, not a fighter.
Yeah.
Any sort of controversy, he's like, it's fine. I don't know about
the girl is mine.
Yeah.
We've got the Marcy Rossman rule. We've got the Joe Wright Roll-Aids rule.
Yeah.
Yes.
So this is good.
I like it.
I've got I think I'm gonna have to throw one in. It'll have to be like the Trey Scott, Brett Favre rule. So because Trey Scott was the one who hit me to Brett Favre. He's my old friend from elementary school through high school who was too small to be on our football team, but basically laid out the linebackers in our football team through basically the tough play that he would play just in our sandlot games. You could hear the smack, because he took it out on them. So when Trey Scott tells you that a player's tough and raves about how tough a guy is, and the guy he raved about to me in the halftime of a Falcons game in his rookie year was Brett Favre, you listen to Trey Scott, because the Trey Scott rule, is that, so if I invoke the Trey Scott rule, that guy's tough.
Then we deem it as so. He is Matt Waldman. You follow him on Twitter at Matt Waldman. There is at Sigmund Bloom. I'm at Cecil Lammey. The show is at the Audible. Don't forget at Jene Bramel as well. Great being back tonight, fellas. Right, Matt?
Oh, absolutely. It's nice to have the four of us get a chance to try for the, how many years in a row to get Gene to flap, but he is unflappable.
That's what this show is really about. That is the actual plot of this show.
The day that Gene loses it, we're retiring.
That's it.
I think that's
maybe much that's the new ending to the show, Cecil.
Yeah, pretty much it. It'll be the day Gene just either breaks down and cries or goes absolutely loony. It's over.
Or just very rationally says, "Why do I hang out with you guys?" That's enough.
Well, that's what I was going to say the show's about. It's like, why does Gene hang out with us?
If he does, but we know why that is, because if he asks that, we know something's really wrong with him at that point.
That's true. Tune in next week to find out.
Blink once if you're in trouble. Anyway, that is a wrap. I feel like doing an AMA. I don't know. Something. We'll figure it out. All right, everyone, we've got preseason watch list going on. We've got a bazillion shows for you to watch and enjoy here on our YouTube channel. Make sure to do all those YouTube things, like, comment, share, subscribe, hit that notification bell so that you never miss a vid. Thank you, Sasha. As everyone out there, we love talking about football. We dig the fact that so many of you enjoy it. So he's Sigmund, he's Matt, I'm Cecil, we're the Audible. Stay tuned and stay frosty.
And Cortland Sutton is slappy.